Challenges they faced in bringing their relative issues to light have been significant, as you'll hear this evening. First of all, I'd like to welcome Lady Sue Hollick, OBE, the representative from this year's judging panel, who will announce the UK winners of the Blueprint for Free Speech Whistleblowing Prize.
Good evening, everyone. As a member of this year's judging panel, I'm delighted to announce the winners of the 2021 Blueprint UK Whistleblowing Prize. This year, the UK prize is shared by several winners across two very important media stories in the public interest. The first story is about one of the largest companies in the UK, British American Tobacco, or BAT. Three brave whistleblowers stepped forward with disturbing disclosures about the company's conduct across Africa. All three are jointly awarded the Blueprint UK Whistleblowing Prize. They are Francois van der Westhuizen, Peter Schneiders and Paul Hopkins. In two separate whistleblowing instances, Paul in Kenya and then Peter and Francois in South Africa presented evidence that British American Tobacco engaged in a consistent campaign of industrial espionage and sabotage against its rivals on the African continent. These activities were condoned by BAT and sometimes conducted out of their London headquarters. Paul Hopkins' disclosures in 2015 sparked off a long-running investigation by the UK's Serious Fraud Office that was closed this January without any charges being laid. This year has seen a further wave of allegations about BAT's activities in South Africa and Zimbabwe, involving the payment of hundreds of informants and the planned bribery of public officials and top politicians. BAT's competitors were intensely surveyed and their shipments interrupted. The company even recruited the head of their competitors' trade association as a double agent. These recent revelations were exposed by the BBC's Panorama programme, the Bureau of Investigative Journalism and the University of Bath's Tobacco Control Research Group. The latest investigations simply would not have happened without the personal testimony and documentary evidence of Francois van der Westhuizen and Peter Schneiders. The Serious Fraud Office are aware of these most recent allegations, but it remains to be seen if BAT will be brought to account. All of us on the judging panel have worked as professional journalists. My husband, Lord Hollick, is a trustee of the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. As a community, we see in this case how vital it is for the link between the whistleblower and the journalist to be protected in law as well as by technology. The co-winner of the UK prize is Jonathan Taylor. He was the in-house lawyer for the oil company SBM Offshore when he blew the whistle on bribery in 2012. A colleague alerted him to evidence of bribes being paid in Equatorial Guinea. After investigating, Jonathan quickly saw that the issue was systemic and bribes were part of the way his employers did business. A formal investigation was set up and millions of dollars of corrupt payments were identified. The scope was truly global. Presented with the findings of the investigation in April 2012, SBM Offshore decided on a containment strategy, sweeping as much of the scandal under the carpet as they could. In the meantime, Jonathan had already taken his findings to the US Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. He left the company shortly after. As a result of Taylor's revelations, SBM has had to pay multi-million-dollar fines in the US, Netherlands and Brazil. A number of former SBM executives have also been convicted of fraud-related offences. And the revelations continue. This summer, a group of media organisations have reported on the irregular payments the company made over many years in Angola. Jonathan Taylor has experienced significant harm as a result of his whistleblowing. He's a British citizen and he lives in the UK. When he arrived in Croatia for a family holiday last year, he was suddenly arrested on an Interpol red notice and restrained there and isolated from his family. Monaco requested his extradition from Croatia in a retaliatory legal attack. Despite several appeals to the British government, Taylor was only able to leave Croatia when the Justice Minister formally rejected Monaco's extradition request. Extradition requests and Interpol red notices are increasingly being used as political tools to silence whistleblowers, and there are few, if any, protections against this kind of retaliation. Many congratulations to this year's UK Blueprint Prize winners: Jonathan Taylor, Paul Hopkins, Peter Schneiders, and Francois van der Westhuizen. Well done.
Thank you, Lady Holick, and congratulations to the British American tobacco whistleblowers, Francois van der Westhuizen, Peter Schneiders, and Paul Hopkins, and to SBM whistleblower Jonathan Taylor. Now, Francois van der Westhuizen joins us on behalf of the British American tobacco whistleblowers. Congratulations, Francois. Can you tell us a little bit about your situation?
I joined the South African police straight after school, and I became involved in the CID, Criminal Investigation Division, straight away. And most of my life in the police force I spent at murder and robbery unit, investigating serious and violent crime. Joined the Road Accident Fund, I had to do private forensics for them. Uncovered massive millions and millions of rands of fraud within the Road Accident Fund, where a conglomerate of police members, doctors, lawyers, etc. were all involved in corruption and fraud. In order to get the attention and the National Prosecuting Authority to do something about that, I also became a whistleblower in South Africa.
And what can you tell us about the role of British American tobacco in the South African economy? How did you come to be involved with BAT?
Yeah, British American Tobacco is probably one of the biggest companies in South Africa. A lot of our PIC, Private Investment Corporation, money has been invested into British American Tobacco. Most of our pension funds are invested within British American Tobacco, as well as in England. You know, so it's a huge company in South Africa. Probably one of the top 3 in the world on the stock exchange. So they use a lot of other sub-companies, Forensic Security Services and Ardent Forensic Security Services, companies that they would contract to when they would do the payouts of the money and for the sources, to sort of like hide the money away in different companies to wash the money, you know, to make sure that they don't get it trailed back to their officers direct.
When would you say you first realised that something was seriously wrong with how British American Tobacco were acting? What kinds of things were they asking you to do?
At first, it seemed like everything was covered by the police, you know. We worked with a lot of police, with SARS people, the Revenue Service people, the National Prosecuting Authority. There was a illicit tobacco task team that was created, and which we as FSS were part of that tobacco task team. And everything seemed legitimate, what we were operating on. And as the years went by and I was more involved in the leadership within British American Tobacco Forensic Security Services on their behalf, it came to my attention that the more and more wrongdoing was occurring. It was actually as if I was back in the apartheid police force, you know, which I was part of the system which I grew up with in the police in the apartheid times. And the way they would execute their mandate was precisely run on a duplicate of how the South African police force worked in that time.
And what motivated you to come forward then?
It's our tax money at the end of the day that goes into these funding of corrupt officials. So somebody has to say something somewhere in South Africa. We can't all, I know there's no specific law that deals with whistleblowers in South Africa. A lot of whistleblowers get murdered and killed for coming forward. It's not a free country as far as that is concerned. We've got a lot of corruption in the country. And if we don't start talking up about it and square up to it, it's just going to lead to more murders and more corruption, and that is not the country I grew up with.
What would you say were the consequences of whistleblowing for you?
You need to understand, that was in 2017. It escalated from there on when I had to go and testify in a South African Revenue Service hearing. My home was petrol bombed on the Saturday prior to me testifying. I went and testified the Monday. Whilst testifying in the departmental hearing, they broke into my wife's school where she was working, and they stole a telephone, and a cell phone and a laptop.
I understand there were consequences for your family as well.
It didn't only stop with my wife, it was my kids involved too. My daughter's car got attacked by a guy on a motorbike with chains and damaged the car. My son was robbed of his bicycle on the way to school and intimidated. The intimidation only started became more and more from the police point of view. Actually, police members who was working in FSS and then joined the police force afterwards. So we were threatened by them, and up to the point where they tried to kidnap my wife. And it was quite a hectic scene, and she got very badly injured in the attempted kidnapping. Luckily, she arose me on the fact what was happening in the street to her, and I came to her aid.
What safety measures would you like to see put in place for whistleblowers?
There should be a law, protecting whistleblowers, because as what happened in the last 2-3 months in South Africa, some of the whistleblowers were taken out by hit squads, just shot dead in front of their children. Some of the people working at FSS were shot dead, just broke into their home, straight to the husband, shoot him dead, working at FSS. So these kind of things happen, and there needs to be more protection for whistleblowers in South Africa. As a whole, where I'm in Europe, I think it's becoming law to assist whistleblowers within December this year. But I think seriously there should be more done for, especially people standing up against these big companies where you are a man alone. Up till today, there's been no support back to me in this regard.
Thank you very much, Francois. Now we have Jonathan Taylor joining us from his home. Jonathan, your case hit the headlines in 2020, but this is a long-running story that started a decade ago when you were working as an in-house lawyer for SBM offshore in Monaco. When did you first become aware that there were issues at SBM offshore?
After almost 8 years of being there, my boss, the General Counsel, received a call from an external counsel, 31st of January 2012, about some alleged bribe, and from that moment on the sluice gates opened, and I suddenly learned an awful lot of information that had been hidden from me in a very short space of time.
Now, you said that paying bribes was part of SBM's business model. How did that work in practice?
It was absolutely the fabric of how SBM did business from top to bottom. So most of the agency agreements, typically with former sales directors or former directors on the board, would be entered into with the company with the sole purpose of paying bribes. Some other contracts were entered into with various kleptocrats where bribes were paid directly without an intermediary. Then there was other agency agreements in, for example, Brazil, where over 100 million was spent paying bribes through a Brazilian agent to Petrobras, for example. So predominantly either direct payments or payments via agents who knew obviously exactly what they were doing.
When did you realise that you had to go to the authorities then?
Within 7 days of the 31st of January 2012, a director was seen filling bin bags and shredding evidence to obviously avoid everything and anything he could in terms of potential prosecution. That's mixed with the board already going in the direction of trying to cover things up. It became patently obvious to me that the company weren't taking the matter seriously, basically because it was the company, that the leaders of the company that were behind all these systems. So they simply couldn't be trusted, and I knew I couldn't stay there because what I was suggesting, doing the right thing, going to the authorities and going with the whole story, not just a tiny fraction of the story, was not something they were interested in doing, and I would have been compromised, knowing what I did if I'd continued there, given their policy of containment, as it was eventually called.
Jonathan, you left SBM Offshore in 2012. Did you have any indication that they were planning to retaliate against you?
No, so I left about 6 months after the sluice gates opened without a job to go to. There was a vigorous confidentiality clause in the agreement I signed upon leaving, but it wasn't obvious that they were going to retaliate at the time, no.
In summer 2020, you were arrested at Dubrovnik Airport on an Interpol red notice, which is quite extraordinary. Tell us what happened there.
So I was arrested, exactly as you say, under a red notice, which is meant for the most serious international criminals, typically warlords, drugs barons, serious sexual and violence offenders. So I was up there with them, being arrested for bribery and corruption, which was really quite an interesting potential charge. It rested in front of my family, my 3 children and my wife, as we were about to begin a holiday, a 7-day holiday in Dubrovnik. I was led away by 4 armed policemen to the cell that there was near the airport, then brought before a judge 10 a.m. the next morning and duly imprisoned for 5 days, expecting it to be at least 30. Fortunately, the decision was appealed and I was set free for what turned out to be 50 weeks.
Outline for us, Jonathan, the consequences for you of blowing the whistle, both public and personal.
So the public consequences are that my former erstwhile employer has been fined over $840 million. A former CEO has been imprisoned, another one has been heavily fined. There have been other salesmen that have been imprisoned. So it's been relatively effective. There are still at least 3 ongoing prosecutions against the company for its torrid past. So it's been effective. In certain sectors of the press, I've been given credit for the downfall of Dilma Rousseff, who was the former president of Brazil and former minister for energy and former chairperson of Petrobras, the Brazilian run oil and gas company, state company. But she was obviously embroiled or connected with mass corruption, including, of course, bribes from SBM. Ultimately, she fell from office early. She was impeached. Likewise, a former vice president of Angola is now in hot water, also in connection with bribes from SBM, someone called Manuel Vicente. So there have been ramifications from a political perspective and, of course, from a perspective of the company being punished in the pocket. And they continue, as they should. The current CEO, Bruno Chabas, was exposed for making a $35 million bribe, and as recently as June. This was reported in the Telegraph. But such is the impunity with which SBM run around the world, he's still in office. But who knows that may be duly investigated in time, and that may cease to be the case.
So now when you look back, Jonathan, what are your thoughts about having gone public? Would you do it again?
It's still too early for me to properly answer that question. Obviously, if I was smiling at you saying I'm so extremely proud of the situation I find myself in now, I'd be misleading you. Having said that, if only legislative authorities can learn from my experience, then it might begin to prove to be worthwhile. Clearly, the world is not ready for corporate whistleblowers. I have been entirely exposed and unprotected, notwithstanding my help of 7 prosecutors who sort of wrung me dry and then left me out to hung, and I was persona non grata when I turned up in Croatia. Notwithstanding my volunteering to go to a whole host of authorities in relation to the SPM scandal, I simply received no protection in response. There was a slap whereby SPM tried to sue me for defamation. They were able to withdraw the matter in Rotterdam without having to pay my costs, as you can in the Netherlands. And yes, there's been some misleading press articles about me, but I'm sort of used to it now. Fortunately, the world by now really understands where I'm coming from and what I've done, and yeah, the company's name has obviously gone through the mud. But the fact of the matter remains, it's still a very successful company.
And in your opinion, what protections do corporate whistleblowers need?
They need to be protected by law, so that those that they are whistleblowing against cannot go after them with frivolous claims, as I suffered in Monaco, where SPM still is the biggest employer. They need to be protected against slaps, against frivolous lawsuits, the sole aim of which is to shut whistleblowers up. Whistleblowers need to go to authorities knowing and being confident in the fact there will be no reprisals. That simply isn't the case. So think of all those things that have happened to me, and think of a law that would avoid those things having happened to me. That's pretty much the answer.
Jonathan, thank you for speaking to us, and congratulations again on your win. And now Lady Sue Hollick will announce the winner of the International Prize.
As a member of this year's judging panel, I'm delighted to announce the winner of the 2021 Blueprint International Whistleblowing Prize. This year, the prize goes to Daniel Hale. Employed as an intelligence analyst in the US Air Force, Hale blew the whistle on the US drone program, its practices, and especially its overwhelming inaccuracy, which has caused many needless civilian deaths. During his service, he was assigned to the National Security Agency, where he was involved in target identification for the drone program. What Hale disclosed has cast invaluable light on the administrative structures that underpin the US drone program, and also the moral injury experienced by those involved in it. Hale's work forced him to become aware of how targets were selected, how strikes were ordered, and their immediate aftermath. His disclosures, published online by The Intercept, prompted greater transparency from the US government about their drone policy and civilian casualties of drone strikes. Hale has publicly exposed a secret, unaccountable process for using technology to target and kill people around the world. When he was sentenced to 45 months in prison in July this year, Hale told the courtroom, "I believe that it is wrong to kill, but it is especially wrong to kill the defenseless." The truth of Hale's revelations echoed again as the US was pulling out of Afghanistan in August. The US sent a drone to bomb alleged terrorists, an action they called a righteous strike. But the strike was wrong. The drone killed 10 innocent civilians, including 7 children. The target, whom the US military claimed was working with ISIS, was in fact a long-time aid worker for a US charity. This final act of the US occupation of Afghanistan illustrates exactly why Daniel Hale should be released from prison and his convictions overturned. Many congratulations to the Blueprint International Prize winner, Daniel Hale.
Thank you, Lady Holick, and congratulations to Daniel. Daniel, the winner of this year's Blueprint International Whistleblowing Prize, was sentenced to 45 months in prison this summer by an American court. He pleaded guilty to one violation of the 1917 Espionage Act, and the sentencing judge recognised that his stand against the drone programme was courageous and principled. It's not easy to communicate with Daniel directly at the moment, but we are able to speak to Noor Mir, who is a personal friend of Daniel Hale. Noor, you've been involved in activism against the drone programme yourself. What do you think is the major importance of the information that Daniel brought to light? What did the public learn about the drone programme that they didn't know before?
Daniel's disclosures weren't really a surprise to communities that have been bearing the brunt of US drone warfare and foreign policy decisions for so many years. But what it did do was verify that many of the targets that are chosen for drone strikes by the United States aren't actually their intended targets, and they are often classified as enemies killed in action. As a whistleblower, as an analyst who was acutely aware of and involved in the inner workings of the drone program, Daniel was able to show the world that oftentimes as many as 9 out of 10 of the people that are killed are unintended targets and are civilians. So, you know, as this rule book was disclosed, a lot of this information came to light at a time when drone strikes were not being questioned to the degree that they might be questioned right now.
How important is continuing media attention on the drone programme?
So media attention around drone strikes is an ebb and flow. I think that what we have learned the hard way is that when we do have disclosures, when we do have analysts and individuals that have participated in the program taking the risk and the steps to tell the rest of the world about it, then there is a flurry of media. But as soon as they're incarcerated or their status changes, we see that media attention go away. So, you know, our request of the press and the media is to tell these stories, is to not only tell the stories of whistleblowers, but to also tell the stories of civilians and families that are killed by drone strikes that don't get this type of attention and deserve it.
You're one of the few people who's able to communicate directly with Daniel at the moment. Have you spoken to him about receiving this prize, and what does he think about it?
Daniel is very humbled and grateful to be receiving this award today. I know that if Daniel was here in person, he would obviously have a lot more to say, but considering the nature of his incarceration, as a member of his support team and as his friend, we hope that this award actually encourages other people that know the truth about crimes that are being committed by governments, about atrocities that are happening in the world, to tell the truth, know that you are joining a community of other brave people that are really making a difference and inspiring future generations to do the same.
I wondered if you might say a little about how Daniel is doing in prison. I know that after conviction he was moved to a prison facility in Illinois, which is designated as a Communications Management Unit, or CMU. What are the implications of that?
Daniel is at a CMU, which is a highly restrictive unit There are 2 that are currently functional in the United States. There are many civil and human rights advocacy groups that are actually pushing for these CMUs to be dismantled. The one that Daniel's in is actually called Little Guantanamo because of the fact that it was the place where a lot of Muslim Americans were sent post 9/11. And we were surprised. He was surprised to be sent there as well. I will say that he is doing as well as he can. His communications, as is the nature of the unit, are severely limited. So for the past 2 months, he has been only able to contact me, which is not great. He should be able to talk to all of his loved ones, all of his friends and family. While he is in a CMU, he is allowed 2 15-minute phone calls a week, and all contacts have to be authorized by the Bureau of Prisons. So it's a very long and arduous process. In addition to that, compared to other places where he could be incarcerated, all phone calls are live monitored by the FBI, and his letters and any sort of reading material that is sent to him is also scanned. So there's definitely a higher sort of threshold of what he is able to receive and what he's able to put out. So I know that if he was not in a CMU, right, he would have been able to issue a public statement today. But because of the nature of his incarceration and the Bureau of Prisons decision, he's unable to do that.
Our thanks to Noor Mir, speaking there on behalf of Daniel Hale. Now, Dr. Sulet Dreyfus will announce the winners of the 2021 Special Recognition Awards and the Lifetime Achievement Award.
Thank you, Razia, and good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Sulet Dreyfus, the Executive Director of Blueprint for Free Speech. As a member of the 2021 Prizes judging panel, I'm pleased to announce the recipients of this year's Special Recognition Awards for integrity and bravery in the public interest. Margaret Mitchell was a founder of Google's ethical artificial intelligence team. She and her colleagues performed vital research into finding and preventing bias in machine learning. When she publicly opposed the mistreatment and firing of the team's co-lead and vocally raised concerns about race and gender inequity at the company, she was fired. Her treatment has highlighted the hazards whistleblowers in the tech industry face at their companies, and her case also highlights the need to defend the integrity of academic research. As a statement by a group of Google employees in support said, researchers and other tech workers need protections which allow them to call out harmful technology when they see it. Congratulations, Margaret Mitchell, a winner of Blueprint's Special Recognition Award. 2 of our whistleblowers receiving Special Recognition Awards this year are from South Africa. They are Babita Deor Karan and Thabiso Zulu. Babita Deor Karan was a whistleblower about corruption, and particularly COVID-19 pandemic-related corruption. As Chief Director of Financial Accounting at South Africa's Gauteng Provincial Government's Department of Health, Babita saw the corruption. She provided evidence of it to an investigation. On August 23, 2021, Babita Deor Karan was assassinated. 6 people have been arrested in connection with her murder, thanks to a witness who has had to go into hiding. The President of South Africa said the country needs to do more to ensure that whistleblowers can safely exercise their rights under the country's Protected Disclosure Act, their whistleblower law. Babita's murder raises questions about why she was not accorded police protection. We hope this award recognizing Babita Deor Karan's bravery as a whistleblower will shine a light on her case. Thabiso Zulu blew the whistle on corruption involving fellow members of South Africa's ruling party, the African National Congress, or ANC. He also provided insights into the 2017 assassination of his friend, Sendiso Magaka, the Secretary General of the ANC Youth League, who had also called out corruption. South Africa is a dangerous place to tell the truth about corruption. The rifle and vehicle used in Magaka's assassination were allegedly linked to the police crime intelligence unit. 2 of the suspects arrested in that case were police officers. Thabiso Zulu became a target for assassination himself. Zulu testified at a commission of inquiry into a wave of political murders in KwaZulu-Natal. He said he had evidence implicating senior ANC politicians and municipal councillors in massive looting and corruption. Thabiso Zulu's uncompromising commitment to exposing the looting of municipal resources, of police brutality, and of whistleblower victimization has made him the target of attacks, death threats, and a failed assassination attempt. His case is now being monitored by international organizations who seek justice and protection for Thabiso Zulu. We are all too aware of what happened to Babita Deokaran. Zulu's story is also one of failures of state entities to protect him from harm. He lives in hiding in fear of his life. He is forced to constantly change the locations where he sleeps at night to evade assassination by hitmen. Yet he refuses to be silenced. The South African government has a responsibility to protect those who report corruption and keep them safe. For his work as an anti-corruption and social justice whistleblower, Blueprint for Free Speech gives Thabiso Zulu its Special Recognition Award. Congratulations, Thabiso. Wirecard was a German financial services company that claimed to have revolutionized the payments industry, but by mid-2020, the company had filed for insolvency. It announced that 1.9 billion euro was missing from the company accounts. Senior figures in the company face fraud charges in Germany. Wirecard responded to criticism from investors and journalists alike, with threats from expensive libel lawyers and other less conventional kinds of threats, like surveillance. This made the Wirecard story very difficult for the media to report on. The breakthrough required the contribution of a whistleblower, and that was Pav Gill. An in-house lawyer at Wirecard based in Singapore, he tried to raise concerns internally but was stonewalled and eventually had to leave. He went to the media and the story ran. Congratulations to Blueprint's Special Recognition Award winner Pav Gill. We have a brief interview of Pav by Razia coming up now.
Thank you, Sulette. And now we have Pav Gill joining us from Thailand. Pav, can you tell us a little bit about your background in Singapore and how you came to work for Wirecard?
So I'm a Singapore citizen, born there, and grew up there as well. Was a lawyer starting out in the financial services space with law firms Allen & Overy, Clifford Chance, before moving to the fintech scene. So I was headhunted to join Wirecard as its first legal counsel based in the region in Asia, sitting in the Singapore office, which was the APAC hub, controlling 11 markets where they were operating in here. So my role was to look after these 11 markets and ensure everything was being done properly from a legal and compliance standpoint.
And when did you first suspect that there was something wrong with the company, and what sorts of things were they doing?
It's very early on in the first few weeks where I was introduced or told to get close to this guy called Ido Kurniawan. Ido was pretty much the number 3 most powerful finance person. So his role was head of international finance, pretty much ran finances from South America all the way to New Zealand in a very gung-ho cowboy fashion. So nothing really added up. I mean, talking about a person, if you look at his CV, relatively inexperienced, maybe 32 years old, 30 years old, could barely put a meaningful email together. So, red flags were there. And the way he conducted and ran the finance department in the Asia Pacific region was also pretty questionable. I mean, he had a tendency of hiring very inexperienced finance personnel and then promoting them to very senior titles. So I think that was a way he could ensure that they were forced to rely on him.
And you discovered a potential fraud quite early on. What was the company's reaction when you brought that to their attention?
I immediately brought the data that I was given by an internal finance employee saying that she was very concerned for her life and her professional well-being in that way, because she was being told to carry out transactions which were clearly wrong, legally especially. And I took her into confidence. I spoke to the Munich legal team right away And they said to engage a third-party law firm to look at everything, which included inboxes, mirrored inboxes of Ido, of the head of Asia Pacific Finance, who reported to him, as well as Ido's number two, look at the data and see what we can get. They were very keen that the third-party law firm was engaged because they didn't want this to be seen as a witch hunt or some kind of agenda. Because what I was told by my supervisor at the time, who was the deputy general counsel, he said that there are two camps in Wirecard. One is the smaller camp that wants to do the right thing, and then there's a bigger one, which is Ido and the rest of them who were in power at the time.
Now, in the wake of Wirecard's collapse, it's become apparent that the company had a policy of trying to intimidate its critics. Did you personally feel at risk during your time with the company?
Yes, I did. I mean, you're talking about a multi-billion euro market cap company, which, at that time was worth more than Deutsche Bank and Commerzbank combined. And here you have things which are just not adding up, and evidence of really financial malpractice crossing into all kinds of illegality. So what do you do in that situation? And then suddenly you feel like pretty isolated because you're told to stand down. The same bosses that were giving you that good piece of info initially are now just slinking back. And, the company's going out of its way to create all kinds of difficulties for you, whether it's intimidation with the local CEO in the Singapore office coming and raising his voice, threatening you, or it's fake HR, malicious HR investigations launched against you. And all this time, you're still trying to do your job. And, everything culminated with Wirecard attempting to send me on a fake business trip to Jakarta. And I received calls from Munich from two anonymous sources saying, we understand you need to go there. Please do not go there, as Wirecard's been known to make people disappear. And if you do, you won't come back. So, I refused to go on that trip. And 4 days later, I was forced to resign.
Pav, thank you. Now we'll go back to Sulet to announce the winner of the 2021 Lifetime Achievement Award.
Daniel Ellsberg is possibly the most famous whistleblower in the world. 2021 has been the 50th anniversary of the publication of the Pentagon Papers, and with it, one of the most important press freedom events in which Daniel played a pivotal role. Daniel was a U.S. military analyst during the Vietnam War. He contributed to a secret report commissioned by the U.S. government that showed that the war in Southeast Asia was a disaster, above all for the Vietnamese, but also for the U.S., and that it had been such for years. Presidents had continually lied to the American people about the war, even as they were deciding whether or not to escalate it. Daniel decided to whistleblow information to the media. He leaked the story to the New York Times, which published it, and the documents became known as the Pentagon Papers. The U.S. Attorney General tried to stop further publication. For the first time in modern history, the U.S. federal government sought prior restraint on publication by a newspaper for national security reasons. When the government wanted temporary halt to publication, the Times obeyed. So Daniel released the Pentagon Papers to 18 other newspapers. The matter was fast-tracked to the U.S. Supreme Court, and this court upheld newspapers' right to publish the story. It was a landmark legal ruling that has provided increased protection to media freedom in the U.S. ever since. Daniel Ellsberg faced criminal charges. The government was prosecuting him on 12 federal felony counts with a possible sentence of 115 years in prison. He was the first whistleblower to be charged under the U.S. Espionage Act. The act, passed in 1917, does not allow the accused to give any explanation or context, nor does it have a public interest component. The only possible defense is essentially, I didn't do it. Since then, the U.S. Department of Justice has charged at least 8 whistleblowers, often using this criticized piece of legislation. And in 2019, in another first, the U.S. Justice Department revealed its charges using that same act against a journalist and publisher, Julian Assange, who is currently sitting in a British prison awaiting extradition to the U.S. to be tried using the same law Daniel Ellsberg was charged under 50 years ago. During Daniel Ellsberg's case, the U.S. government began a dirty tricks operation against him. Operatives broke into his psychiatrist's office to steal medical records, set up illegal phone taps, and conduct other criminal acts. In an echo of this, the government has pursued similar dirty tricks against publisher Julian Assange, including warrantless surveillance, illegal breaches of legally privileged conversations and medical conversations, and hatching plans to assault and kidnap him. It reveals a pattern of behavior that Daniel Ellsberg has called out. The judge in Daniel Ellsberg's case eventually threw out the criminal charges against him because the totality of the circumstances, he said, surrounding the government's criminal actions against him offended a sense of justice. Since then, Daniel Ellsberg has spent 50 years tirelessly defending the citizens' right to know and to speak truth. It is an extraordinary record of service to the public. Congratulations, Daniel Ellsberg, winner of the 2021 Blueprint for Free Speech Lifetime Achievement Award.
Sulette, thank you very much indeed. Welcome to you, Daniel Ellsberg, and congratulations on winning the Blueprint for Free Speech Lifetime Achievement Award. It's an absolute pleasure to be speaking with you, Daniel. Let's take you back to the time when you were privy to top secret documents about the Vietnam War. Can you recall the moment, the time when you thought, I actually need to do something with this?
Well, there was a process of realizing, first from reading the early parts of those Pentagon Papers, which dealt with the so-called French War from 1945 to 54 in Indochina, I realized from those top secret accounts that it had never been solely a French war as we thought in the government. It had been a French-American war, as the Vietnamese well understood. We were paying most of the cost of that war to keep the French in it, to avoid our president being in office when another piece of territory was lost, supposedly, to America and came under communist control. So that meant that our involvement had been illegitimate from an American anti-imperialist point of view, and we thought of ourselves that way, having broken away from the world's largest empire, British Empire, in the 1776. And here we were supporting a French effort to reconquer a former colony by force, which had no legitimacy. And that meant to me that all of the people killed on both sides due to our funding of that war were due to us, and it was unjustified homicide, which is to say murder. And I felt I couldn't be part of that anymore, and beyond that, it was really my obligation to expose it and to do what I could to resist it. The other things I learned at that time were that President Nixon intended to continue the war. He intended to win it, but I was sure his threats would not do that and would simply prolong the war and enlarge it. So I thought it might be helpful to reveal that up till that time, the war had been carried on by lies by the executive, unconstitutionally, illegally, and that Nixon was doing the same. And finally, when I saw the example of a young American, Randy Keeler, and a day before, Bob Eaton, going to prison for draft resistance, nonviolent draft resistance, it put in my mind the question that would not have been there otherwise. What can I do to help end the war now that I'm ready to go to prison? And that enlarged for me the set of things that could be done, and one of them was to reveal this top secret history of illegal war.
When you look back on that time, I mean, you have said quite recently that you have no regrets, except that perhaps you would have revealed what you had, the documents that you had, much earlier. I wonder how pressing that regret is.
Well, I wouldn't say I live with regret. I look back and try to learn from it and to encourage other people to act in a more timely way than I did. As I've been saying for decades now to people who were in the position that I was in, with access to documents of lies, crimes, deceptions, wrong predictions, foolish policies, don't do what I did. Don't wait till the bombs are falling or thousands more people have died before you consider going to the press and to Congress, but also the press, with documentary evidence that bears on the public's decision as to whether to support a war or not. Do that at whatever cost to yourselves, because a war's worth of lives may be at stake.
You went to the press again recently at the 50th anniversary of the revelations that we now regard as the Pentagon Papers. Just tell us what it was that prompted you to do that, because what you were revealing was more classified information.
That's right. It was a coincidence that it's the 50th anniversary. It's sad to think that we are following in the footsteps, not just of the French and the Japanese, as in Indochina, or as in Afghanistan. Many years later, the footsteps of the Russian invaders, of the British, Genghis Khan, Alexander. We're following this imperial policy still 50 years after the Pentagon Papers, and the documents I was now revealing had to do with an earlier crisis, so-called, in the Taiwan Straits, where our leaders had been prepared to unleash all-out nuclear war to defend a rocky island a mile and a half off the Chinese coast, to keep it under the sovereignty of Taiwan, and to risk in that process nuclear war with Russia and possibly with China.
Well, let's talk about the current leadership, because in the context of this year's Blueprint International Whistleblower Prize, Daniel Hale, a national security whistleblower, very much like yourself. I mean, what do you think is the significance of his whistleblowing and the response to it, and the fact that he is now in jail serving his sentence?
Daniel Hale deserves to be seen as great a patriot as his ancestor, his actual ancestor, Nathan Hale, the first American to be tried for giving secrets to Americans. And that was during the American Revolution. Nathan Hale was hanged by the British as a traitor to George III. And as he was being hanged, as he was actually a traitor, as he was, as were all the signers of the Declaration of Independence, as was George Washington, who had enlisted him as a spy on the British. As he was about to be hanged, Nathan Hale famously said, "I regret that I have but one life to give for my country." Now, which country? George III regarded him as a loyal subject who was now in a state of treason. As he had been just years before a loyal subject, he had now discovered a new country to be loyal to, one that scarcely existed yet, and one that came to have a First Amendment, which the British Empire does not have to this day, and not to have an Official Secrets Act, not to make it treason, as it was then, to criticize or cast aspersions on the ruler, the emperor. That's not our country. All of the whistleblowers in the last few decades have risked a life of freedom. And Snowden's still in exile in Russia, perhaps for the rest of his life. Chelsea Manning, 7.5 years in prison. Daniel Hale now in prison for having revealed what he should have revealed about criminal behavior by our government in the drone program, in which whether or not assassination by drone is to be regarded as somehow now in the instrument box of an American president, is somehow now constitutional. What Daniel revealed was that 17-1 victims of our drone attacks were so-called innocents, people who had not threatened us, who were not targeted, a wholly disproportionate killing. We think of the drone attacks as somehow very precise and surgical, and what he revealed was that yes, they don't kill as many innocent people or bystanders, civilians, as they would with an even larger warhead, but that doesn't make this murder of non-combatants less murder. So he is revealing criminal behavior by our government, and it's absurd, of course, from any sense of any rule of law, that you should be imprisoned for revealing criminality. by your government or by anyone else. But that's the status he was and is in. So President Barton should never have indicted him or prosecuted him or come to this point. He can redeem that mistake only by pardoning Daniel Hale right now, and along with him, Julian Assange in Britain, and Ed Snowden. And retrospectively, it should be the others, like Chelsea Manning and others, Tom Drake. But in any case, to have the First Amendment, for which in part we fought a revolution, a war of independence, to continue that, it is essential that we stop using the so-called Espionage Act as if it were a British Official Secrets Act.
An act, of course, that was used against you, Daniel Ellsberg. I mean, I wonder to what extent you sit comfortably with the mantle that you are, in a way, a kind of secular patron saint of whistleblowers. All the names that you mention are all people, no doubt, who know of your story. And I wonder to what extent you have advised people who have potentially wanted to blow the whistle.
None of them have asked me for advice before doing this. Actually, it's a longer story, but Julian Assange did to some extent. But the others, but he was, of course, not in the position of a whistleblower or source himself. He was in the position of a publisher, like the New York Times. The others, of course, revealed virtually what they were doing to virtually no one, because that would have incriminated the others. I was in the same position with my colleagues at RAND, or even at the beginning with my fiancée and my wife, not to incriminate her by telling her beforehand. I've sought out most of these whistleblowers once they became known, because I identify with them. I, like them, have gone through the same trajectory. After all, we wouldn't have had access to the secrets we revealed had we not earlier obeyed secrecy regulations that we probably should not have at various times. We've all kept secrets. That's part of our professional life, and some of them should not have been kept any more than the ones we finally revealed. So having gone through this same trajectory, I want to support them, sympathize them, share any experiences that I had with him, and that's been a very rewarding experience. I've met most of them, not unfortunately Daniel Hale, and I hope to meet him in freedom.
I wonder to what extent you think that the current climate is more restrictive and more just much harder to operate in than the climate that you were in 50 years ago.
Well, it's not so much a matter of the climate being different. When I say that Nathan Hale was the first American, I like to say this, who was tried and hung for giving secrets to Americans, I was the second. 200 years later, more than 200 years later, had gone by without trying anyone for that offense, supposed offense. And I was the first then to be prosecuted under the same charges as Assange, Hale, and the others, Snowden. And then, when you say the climate changing, over the next 20 years, there were really only two other cases, one of which was later dropped. So there had been three. Then President Obama, having come in promising a more open government, actually brought more cases against whistleblowers than all previous presidents put together. Trump, he did that in two terms. Donald Trump prosecuted the same number in one term. So, and then included for the first time a journalist, like Assange, not like Assange being the one so far. And if he is indicted, he is indicted. If he was extradited and prosecuted and convicted, he would not be the last journalist. It would be the end of the First Amendment, essentially. It isn't then a question so much of the climate having changed. The government lying is pretty much the same now as ever, I'm sorry to say. And that's not a surprise. The prosecution of people to keep the secrecy is what has changed. That's an attitude by the executive branch. And especially, of course, since 9/11, they've taken on themselves the excuse of prosecuting more whistleblowers and assassinating people by drones. And in fact, against me, domestic crimes were conducted to shut me up against further information about Nixon. That included attempting to incapacitate me or assassinate me on the steps of the Capitol on May 3rd, 1972, in the midst of my legal proceedings, and having heard me on illegal wiretaps. Now, it's been revealed that exactly those same offenses have been conducted against Julian Assange, and so, of course, should lead to the end of his prosecution as it did mine. But that hasn't happened. So, in effect, presidents are calling on themselves to be beyond any restrictions whatever. Our Constitution, the amendments, First Amendment, beyond that. President Ford long ago made an executive order forbidding assassination. The drone program now is an assassination program, including American citizens.
So Daniel, I mean, just tell me, given everything that you've said, the context that you lay out, if somebody came to you with all of your experience saying, I want to blow the whistle on this is what I think is happening here, I think it's really dangerous.
Well, I say to people in general, I don't tell anyone, I haven't told anyone before or after, you were obligated to do this, because there's always considerations of family and of other obligations they have and possibility of affecting other policies in the future. They have to decide for themselves. But I say in general to people who come across such information of criminality or other problematic behavior by the government, consider paying a very high personal price. And the odds are that if you're identified, you will pay a price, a very high price. I am an exception because of almost miraculous circumstances. Crimes against me were revealed in time to free me before I went to prison. The crimes have now been revealed against Julian Assange. He's still under indictment, and still they're trying to extradite him. So the risk is very high. And I would say, actually, given the likelihood that it will actually affect events, which is small, you have to ask yourself whether it's worth taking a high risk to reveal this information, a high personal risk.
What's the answer to that, Daniel? Is it worth it?
Ask yourself whether you are willing to take that risk, because the risk is high and the chance of actually changing events, as opposed to just revealing information, is low. But it very much can be worth taking that risk. In my case, it played a role in shortening the war. Was that worthwhile? Of course it was, even if it had failed. The attempt was obviously worth it. I would say, if, on the other hand, you find that what you have to reveal you don't feel is worth it, don't do it, because it is a high risk. But it can be worth taking a very large risk, personally, as people do in combat. But in civilian life, showing the moral courage of taking a high risk, at the very least, of ostracism and even of prison nowadays, that very much can be worth taking. And from my experience of other whistleblowers who have paid a high price, unlike me, I don't know one who has actually regretted it, because whether or not it had the results they hoped, the effort was essential, was worth it for them by any means.
Well, generations who've come after you, Daniel Ellsberg, are grateful to you for having paid the price that you paid. Thank you so much for being with us. And once again, congratulations. Daniel Ellsberg, winner of the Blueprint 2021 Lifetime Achievement Award.
Thank you for this honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, and congratulations, Daniel Ellsberg, winner of Blueprint's 2021 Lifetime Achievement Award. That brings us to the end of this year's Blueprint for Free Speech Whistleblowing Prizes. Thank you to Soulette and Lady Holick, and congratulations once more to all the winners. Now, you can read more about their work by heading to the Blueprint for Free Speech website. That's www.blueprintforfreespeech.net. Do enjoy the rest of your evening.